Hello, welcome to another motorcycling video. In this video I'm travelling west on the Crookwell Road from Goulburn. In the first clip from this ride I talked about pillion safety, and I mentioned that I had my brother on the back, so it's the same ride that I've taken. This is just another a clip from that ride, and I'm going to talk to you in this video about some information that I became aware of courtesy of carsales.com.au. I watched one of their videos on YouTube, and to the best of my knowledge the information that they provided is accurate. The manufacturer concerned and mentioned in this video has not, to my knowledge, disputed the facts, nor have they asked for the video to be withdrawn. Therefore I'm presenting the information in good faith, and should it be pointed out to me that the information is inaccurate, or should there be errors in my presentation here, then I'm happy to correct those, or if necessary withdraw the video should that be the case. All right, with all of that said, let me get straight into it. Imagine if I told you that there was an automobile sold in Australia that costs $164,000 that has been on sale for a little over 2 years and has been recalled 13 times in that period. When I say has been recalled, I mean the entire fleet of vehicles sold in Australia, of which there are not many, but nevertheless the entire fleet has been recalled 13 times. So that is an average of 6.5 recalls per year for the 2 years that it has been on sale. Imagine if I told you that one of its competitors has an average recall rate of 3 recalls per year. Another of its competitors has an average recall of 0.6 recalls per year. I'm not sure how you have 0.6 of a recall, but nevertheless that is the statistic that was presented. And another of the manufacturers of this particular type of vehicle has a recall rate of 0. You would probably jump to the conclusion that the vehicle I mentioned, the one that cost $164,000 and has been recalled 13 times, was a poorly made Chinese vehicle. You would be incorrect in that. In fact, the vehicle that I'm talking about is the Ford F-150. Now, there are two principal issues to talk about in relation to this vehicle. Number one is, why does it cost so much? $164,000 drive away from the dealer landed in Australia. And secondly, why are there so many recalls? Well, let's deal with the first issue of the cost. The Ford F-150 has been made in various permutations and incantations since the 1970s in the United States. It's been recalled 400 times in that period. The base model in the US sells for about $40,000. So consumers are prepared to put up with some recalls because it's relatively cheap. There are 4 variants of that vehicle, and in Australia we only get the 4th variant, which is called the Lariat. It tops out in the United States dollars at about $88,000. So okay, that's about half of what it costs in Australia, $164,000 to drive out of the dealership. Some of that cost differential can be attributed to the exchange rate. Currently the Australian dollar is worth about 69 cents US. So some of the price variation is to do with US to Australian dollar exchange rates. Some of the cost is of course attributed to the cost of getting the vehicle to Australia, which is somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 per vehicle. Some of the cost is attributed to taxation and charges when it lands in Australia, which is it's taxed at 5% of the value when it lands in Australia, plus the GST. So there's a 15% tax when it lands in Australia. The next thing that affects the cost of the vehicle is a ADR, or Australian Design Rules certification, which costs between $2,000 and $4,000. Then comes the next cost, which is the right-hand drive conversion. Now one of the problems with the F-150 is that it's not made in right-hand drive models. It's only made for the American market as a left-hand drive vehicle. So it is then shipped to Australia and it needs to be converted to a right-hand drive. Those conversions cost anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per vehicle. And it's not simply a matter of, well, we'll just move the steering wheel from one side of the vehicle to the other. Obviously that's what happens, but you have to cut some holes in the bodywork to accommodate the steering wheel. Because an engine is not symmetrical, there is less space on the right-hand side than there is on the left-hand side, the way the engine is configured and placed in the vehicle. So different parts are needed for the steering mechanism in Australia, where Ford Ranger parts are used rather than the parts that are used in the United States. On top of that, there are about 500 other parts that need to be relocated or changed. The whole dashboard needs to be redesigned, so it's now angled and facing towards a driver sitting on the right-hand side of the vehicle. But the bigger problem is that essentially you've got to rewire the entire front of the vehicle. You have got to convince the vehicle management system and the software that operates it that the left is now right and right is now left. And so there must be millions of lines of code and so forth that are required to be somehow overridden, rewritten, or something done to convince that code that when you are now driving on the other side of the road, and just because you're on this other side of the road, the lane departure system doesn't, and the lane keeping assistance system doesn't need to kick in and drag you across to the other side of the road. So there are lots of things that are needed to be done in order to get that vehicle to be compliant with Australian design rules and then registrable as a right-hand drive vehicle. And that, as I said, is about between $20,000 and $30,000. So you're seeing how the costs add up: $5,000 to $7,000 to ship it out here, $2,000 to $4,000 for an ADR certificate, $20,000 to $30,000 for the right-hand drive conversion, and then on top of that, there is somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 in on-road costs from the dealer. So all of those costs eventually end up in the on the ticket price that the consumer pays, leading you to the $164,000 price tag. Now, if you have paid $164,000, and as the gentleman making this video from carsales.com said, your house deposit status symbol ute that you've bought that now sits most of its time not in your driveway so everyone can see that you bought one, but most of its time seems to sit in the service bay of the dealer that you bought it from, then clearly you're not going to be a very happy camper. And the proof of that is that in January of this year, 230 F-150s were sold. By July, 0 F-130s were sold. Now, surprisingly, in December of 2025, something like 500 F-130s were sold, F-150s, I beg your pardon, were sold, and I have a suspicion, although I have no evidence to support this, and certainly the carsales.com presenter did not say this, I have a suspicion that some of that may be a Kia Tasman type situation. What do I mean by that is that the Kia Tasman, Kia said that they would sell 20,000 Tasmans in a calendar year. They sold 2,000. Kia Seoul told Kia Australia, you have to meet that figure, you have to shift these vehicles, they're here in your market, they're right-hand drive vehicles, we're not shipping them anywhere else, you have to sell them. So Kia Australia told its dealers that they had to take a swag of these vehicles and sell them as demonstrators. Now, car sales figures in Australia are calculated on registration. So once the vehicle is registered, it is considered to be sold. So the dealer registers a bunch of these Kia Tasmans and as demonstrators, and then sells them as demonstrators without actually discounting the price, but they're sold as a demonstrator. So obviously you get it as a lower price because it's almost a used car, and so the sales figures are boosted, stock is got off the lot, and so on. I suspect that the 500 odd F-150 sold in December is a similar case, although I have no evidence to support that, and carsales.com certainly did not say so. So there are the reasons, first of all, why this car costs so much. Now, the second problem is, well, why are there so many recalls? Competitors for this vehicle, by the way, are the Ram 1500, the Chevrolet Silverado, and the soon-to-be-released Toyota Tundra. The Ram 1500 has been on sale in Australia since about 2017 and has had an average of 3 recalls per year. The Silverado has had a recall of 0.6 per year, and the Tundras have 0 recalls. And according to the presenter from carsales.com, Toyota decided to provide 300 of these vehicles for vigorous and rigorous testing before they decided to use the cliche green light the sale of these vehicles to Australia. So hopefully by the time they come to Australia and are sold, the people who are considering them will not have to deal with something like 6.5 recalls per year. But okay, so why are there so many recalls and what is the problem here? Well, let's start at the beginning. The vehicle is made for a left-hand drive market. It has to be converted to a right-hand drive market. And as I said, that's not simply a case of, well, we'll just move the steering wheel over to the other side of the vehicle and everything's fine, Bob's your uncle. There are lots of things to do. Apparently something like 500 parts need to be relocated. And according to the presenter from carsales.com, the wiring loom almost needs to be entirely replaced. And there is this issue of convincing the software that runs the vehicle that it's now driving on the other side of the road and everything is fine. Now in Australia there is a company in Melbourne, I think they're called Walkinshaw Automotive, and they do left-hand to right-hand drive conversions. They've been doing them for a very long time. I'm not here to spruik their business. I'm only telling you what the carsales.com.au gentleman said. They've been doing this for a very long time and they have been very successful at it. In fact, they are the gold standard, which is why their prices are somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000. Now, Ford, for reasons best known only to Ford, decided not to deal with this particular company. They preferred instead to deal with a company that they were dealing with in Thailand. Now the company in Thailand, whose name I can't remember, and I'm not sure that I've written it down here in my notes, so I don't want to name it incorrectly. RMA were the name of the company, and they were used to doing left-hand to right-hand drive conversions in Thailand for the military and the police and conforming with Thai standards, but they had no experience of dealing with left-hand to right-hand drive conversions in Australia. And you might think it's the same process, but Australian design rules are probably significantly different from the rules governing the sale of vehicles in Thailand. Compliance is a difficult thing, and you need local expertise. So what RMA did was they built a factory in Victoria. Yes, they spent a lot of money on the factory. They spent a lot of money on training and development and equipment and so on. Ford decided to use them because they were already working with them in Thailand, and they thought that that is the RMA people, would do the job cheaper than would the other company. And yes, they would do it cheaper, but as we all know, when you pay cheap or buy something cheap, you end up paying twice. You end up paying first of all for the cheap product, and then you end up paying again when you buy a better product, or get someone else to do the job properly the second time around, or you have to replace the cheap one with another cheap one. So RMA did the best they could to build up something that the other company had been doing for 20 years and develop the expertise they had in a very short space of time so those vehicles could get on the market. Now, even if they had the same knowledge and expertise as Walkinshaw Automotive, some of the problems that occur with these vehicles don't present themselves until the vehicle is on the road. The gentleman from carsales.com.au that was presenting this video explained that they had been given one of these F-150s to test, and at one point, without any explanation, suddenly the vehicle just basically stopped working. Warning lights came on all over the dashboard, and the vehicle basically just shut itself down and stopped working, and it had to be towed away on a flatbed truck. So problems that appeared to have been solved by wiring the vehicle properly, by placing the steering wheel, by putting all the instruments, by doing all the things to convert it from left-hand drive to right-hand drive were done. But then the vehicle got on the road, driving in Australian conditions, which are not Thai conditions and are not conditions encountered in the United States, and suddenly things started to go wrong with this vehicle, and each time in the case of people who bought these vehicles, they had to take the car back to the dealer, and the dealer had to rectify the problem under warranty and then recall all the other vehicles that had been sold, because they recognised that this was not just a one-off problem with this particular vehicle, but a problem with the fleet of vehicles. Now, it's true to say not very many of these vehicles have been sold. F-150s have been sold in Australia, possibly 1,000, maybe 1,500 in a year. When you consider that Ford Ranger and Toyota Hilux sell about 54,000 each, and the BYD Shark 6, and I'm not recommending any of these cars, I'm just quoting sales figures. The BYD Shark 6 sold something like 18,000 in its from the beginning of the year, from the time it was released till the end of the year. The number of F-150s sold isn't a big number, but if you have paid $164,000 for a car, and it spends more of its life in the workshop than it does in your driveway, or it does with you sitting in it doing what you bought it for, which is presumably to go off-roading. The camping trip had to be postponed, the holiday had to be postponed, the caravan had to be left down the coast, the boat couldn't be taken out because the vehicle was dealing with another recall, then you certainly would be unhappy, and you would not have got what you would consider to be value for money. Now, takeaways for this, I guess, are, well, if you are considering buying a truck or a pickup, or whatever we call them these days, of that nature, your options appear to be the F-150, the Ram 1500, the Silverado, and the soon-to-arrive Toyota Tundra. I would imagine, based on the information that I have here and what I've just presented to you, which, as I say, to the best of my knowledge, Ford have not disputed it. They have not asked car sales to take down their video. The F-150 would be, I guess, at the bottom of your list. So as a consumer, do your research, see what else is available besides the F-150, if that's the one you've got your mind set on. When I say do your research, look at this video, look at the car sales video, talk to people who own these if you can find them, read reviews and so forth. If you're still determined to have one, then have one. But you have been, if you've done all that work, you've been forewarned as well as you can be. For Ford, I suppose there are a couple of lessons. Number one is to say, well, if we're only selling 1,000 or so of these, maybe 1,500 vehicles a year, is it really worth our while to sell this vehicle into Australia? Well, given that they've now spent all this money to set up a factory, albeit a joint venture with this RMA Automotive, it probably is worthwhile to continue to do that now. But if they thought about it beforehand and thought, well, how many of these will we sell? And they'd said, well, we'll sell 1,500. They might have thought, well, maybe it's not such a good idea to offer this vehicle into the Australian market because the conversion costs and so forth are going to make it prohibitive in the first place. The second point would be, if you did decide as a company that you were going to offer this vehicle, and clearly you did, then the thing to do would have been to work with this Walkinshaw Automotive, who are the experts and who've been doing it for 20 years and have set the gold standard, and find a way for them to be able to do your work for you, give them sufficient time and notification and money and whatever, so that if they needed to expand their workshop and put on more staff and so on, they could, and train their staff. Or if you were determined to go ahead with the Thai company operating a factory in Australia and so forth, then perhaps you would go to work and maybe poach some of the people from Walkinshaw Automotive to, since they are the best of the best, to come to your factory and train your staff so that they would be, as quickly as possible, the best of the best. Now, according to the presenter from Car Sales, he anticipates that in 2026 the sales of F-150s will pick up. They will have now become aware of all of the problems to do with the conversion, and they will be addressing those in the factory before the vehicle is sent to the dealer, so that you're told it's on the lot and you can buy one. That, however, might mean that it takes longer between the vehicle arriving in Australia and the vehicle being converted properly and then offered for sale in Australia. At the moment, as I understand it, there was a period during 2025, when Ford had issued a stop sales order and were taking no more orders for this vehicle. Now, presumably by the fact they sold 500 odd in December, that is no longer the case. But given the fact that they've had 13 recalls in 2 years, or 6.5 per year, hopefully coming into 2026 they have ironed out all the issues involved in converting this vehicle. I don't expect there'll be a price drop. I really think there might even be a price increase, because if the conversion takes longer, then ultimately the consumer, the person buying the car, pays the cost of the conversion. All right, well, so there are some thoughts on the F-150 as reported by carsales.com, and I'm just using their information as commentary while I'm writing. As I said at the beginning of the video, to the best of my knowledge, their information is accurate and correct. If you are aware of any inaccuracies that I have mentioned here, please leave a comment in the appropriate section of the video, and when I become aware of it, I will respond to it. If the circumstances were to change and carsales.com made a correction to their video and I became aware of it, I would make the same correction to my video. All right, well, thanks for watching and thanks for listening. As I said, if you've got a comment, leave it. If you're out riding, have a good day riding, ride safely. As you can see here, I'm stuck behind a truck that's hauling 2 tractors. It only looks like one, but there's one in front of that. And so I determined to sort of stay back a little bit and stay away from anything that might be flying off the back of the truck in terms of bits of grain or straw or wheat or grass or anything like that, or stones being thrown up by the truck. So that's why I'm so far behind it. And also, as you can see, there are double lines, so the opportunity for passing just isn't there. Have a good day when you're riding, ride safely, and I'll be talking to you again when I make the next video, whenever that may be. There's a few more minutes of video, about another minute of video if you'd like to watch till the end then, and I'll talk to you when I'm making the next video. Thanks for watching.